Hello, this is an assessment before tuning of a Brasted upright piano made in 1961. Now, when you first looked at this piano, you can see the felt behind the keys is intermittent, and that's almost certainly been eaten by moth. So we need to look under the keys as well to see what sort of damage there might be, because that's where they tend to destroy the felts. Now, Brasted apparently took over Eve's staff in about 1926. Please correct me if I get anything wrong here. And they used a similar style piano stool that they made for the Eve staff Pianette and the Eve staff Mini pianos, and Mini Royal too, which that was Brasted, in fact, that under the Eve staff name. They're very small pianos with drop action, so as we've mentioned before, we don't necessarily recommend them for study, but they're well-made pianos. Here we've got stickers on the keys. Personally, I would take those off, and maybe the keys need buffing at the same time. We pulled the piano out, so I've been able to look at the back of the piano, and there's the serial number. We found that inside the piano as well. The back of the piano is in reasonable condition, dirty, but obviously that could be cleaned. And the piano itself was a little bit on the dirty side and needs touching up here and there. And we noticed that the piano's got some gliders underneath it, which means much better than casters, I think, for upright pianos. You can glide it along. You can put gliders on your piano if you've got casters. Sometimes the casters make the pedals too high, so that's just the point I thought I'd mention. Now, the piano is generally in good condition. Have a quick look at the inside, and we're going to look at the action later. And just have a listen to the tone of the piano. And it's generally a very pleasant sound. Notice here there's only two strings. On the Eve staff Mini Pianette, they only had two strings in the middle, so they've got some designs that are similar. Obviously the idea is to try and match the tone there, and then it's well matched. Break points not perfect, but generally the bass is good. The action's in very good condition. It has been refaced at some stage, so the hammers are a bit on the bright side. And interestingly, a couple of tapes we found haven't been fitted on. We're going to fit. They're actually there, so not sure why they're not put back on. But we'll have to put them on to take the action out. Otherwise, it's difficult to put it back in without the tapes working. So now we put these tapes back on. You have to be very careful not to break tapes when they're older. We often put a bit of lubricant. Actually, my colleague who does most of the action work actually uses soap, soapy water, just gentle soapy water to make them less brittle, and then when you pull them off, they get back on more easily. So those two went back on without any problem. Now I've taken the action out. You can see a little bit of moth damage on the hammers there, and somebody's obviously done some work. They've replaced this felt, or I'm not quite sure what's been done there, but that felt there is obviously the slap rail here, which is to try and stop the dampers making a noise, or to encourage them not to go too far back. Obviously that weakens the spring if they're going to constantly go too far back. And just sort of looking along the back of the action, we can't really see too much moth damage on there, which is encouraging. Sometimes the moths eat the jack felts, and that makes a clicking noise. So if you've got a clicking noise on some notes on your piano, then that could well be that. It's very likely. But the dampers look pretty good, a clean bill of health for those. Now I can see from the hammers they have been refaced, so they need to be refaced to as much to a point as possible, and then you have to line them up to the strings, make sure they're hitting all three strings together. We'll check that later. Now we've taken the keys out. See this very interesting little sticker here which says Ivorette. That presumably is the type of plastic they've used called Ivorette, and the date there is 2960, so that figures with the date that we've got for the piano for 1961. So this action is obviously made just before, well, the same sort of time. And on the bottom key here we also have Herberger Brooks, Long Eaton, Nottingham. That's not surprising. They made easily the majority of English piano actions. And you can see here the felts have been eaten by moths, fortunately not destroyed. Now you could replace all those felts. It's not going to make any difference to the action if you do, although cosmetically, if it's one of our pianos that we're selling, hopefully it's not got moth in the first place, but occasionally we do get one that we've got to replace the felts. So those are the felts on the balance rail, and they're all there, but they're just chewed at the sides. So they're all working. Whether you want them replaced or not is personal, really, because the main thing is to treat for moth, make sure that there's no live moth. And somebody seems to have done that already, because I can't see any live moth, and it's reasonably clean under here. So the front bays as well, that's been eaten a bit. Again, it hasn't affected the touch, I don't think, but we'll check the key dip. And so that can be done. Obviously, it's a job we can do. It's going to cost more if we do that. And certainly, whenever the piano's had extensive work done to it, then that's something you'd always do. Now, while we've got the action out, we'll just look at the bridge. It's very unusual. You'd have heard, if, for instance, the bridge was cracked here, you'd hear a different noise on that note. It would sound very thin and possibly tinny. But both sides there, they can crack, but it hasn't happened on this. And we did take the bottom panel off as well. And again, there's a bit dirty there, so that can all be cleaned up. Nothing to do with the acoustic quality of the piano. One of our pianos, obviously, we're going to do that too and generally clean it. And there's the serial number, and that allowed us to date it according to our records, 1961. So the hammers have been refaced. We can check whether they're hitting all three strings by presenting to the strings and then plucking. And that's something we'll do if we voice the piano, if the client wants us to do so. If you listen to some of the hammers, you can hear that they are different tones. So that's quite round, slightly out of tune. And that's quite brash, really. So we can voice that hammer. So to voice this hammer, here's my voicing needles, and just gently at the end. Some people say you should just voice near the end and not on the very end, but as I mentioned on other videos, Steinway chief technician voices at the very end, down to 1.5 millimeters. So we're just going to voice that and then have a listen. Good thing about uprights as opposed to grands is you don't have to take the whole action out to voice. That's better. And now that one sounds brash. So obviously you've got to ask the client before we overdo it, and he doesn't like the tone of the piano. He might like a brash sound. So some people like a very bright tone for jazz perhaps, and a more gentle tone for classical romantic. That needs a bit more voicing. Well, that would be my taste, but as I say, I've got to ask the client. Just going to check the regulation of the hammers to the sustain pedal, and we want them, as we said before, to lift off so that they well clear the strings, especially here where they can get a bit on the close side, and when you tune it, it's hard to tune. Besides which, it's not pulling off properly. So that's pulling off just about right, actually, so that's excellent. I suspect someone's already regulated that, and in fact, to the keys, so this is B and C, and they're pulling off almost identically. Not quite identical, but about halfway, past halfway. Past halfway makes it slightly lighter. Before halfway, make it slightly heavier. And those two aren't quite the same, but you're not going to perceive very much as a pianist. We can obviously do all this work if you wanted it done, but that's, I think, quite acceptable, really. So just past halfway, and all of them seem to be the same. Sorry, what I meant there is the hammer goes just past halfway as I press the key down before the dampers lift off. And that's almost too far, but it works fine, I think. And it lifts the damper off sufficiently. The piano's been used quite extensively, I think, and about 8 years ago, apparently, it was restored and basically regulated, I think, mainly. And they've also treated it for moth. So there's quite a lot of work being done. The main work, I think, that will improve the piano acoustically is obviously tuning, voicing the hammers, and we can tidy up the case if that's something you want to do. And the key weighting, well, 57 is not too bad for the bottom bass, 44 here, 40 for middle C, that's a sign of it having been played more in the middle, I think, and going up to 44 is not too bad, but maybe that's a bit on the low side. We could try and even that out at perhaps, say, certainly 45, and well, 50 would be the normal weight that you'd want there. So that's something that we can do. So that's an assessment of a Brasted upright piano made in 1961. And this style of Brasted, at this time Brasted were making E-staff mini pianos, and they were much more common. So occasionally you might get one that has Brasted on it, normally Brasted is associated with the older, traditional looking pianos, certainly the ones I've seen. But if you're in the trade and have seen many of these, the client said he's seen a similar one to this. So that was sold by Russell Acott in Oxford, and probably they sold that one too. So the main things, I think, in terms of the playability that we need to do is tuning the piano and then voicing the hammers. Some are a lot brighter than others, and I've already voiced a couple round here. So I hope that's helpful. If you're interested in having a piano assessed before tuning, then please do let us know. I'm keen to do that because I've mentioned before that in our own piano at home, which we had when we were growing up, it was just tuned and there was work to do on it which needed to be done. Nowadays most tuners would do it, but sometimes we come across pianos that are not regulated at all, or not worked on apart from tuning. Thank you very much for listening. So fine-tuned now, and done a bit of voicing as well. And it's a fine piano. It's quite bright sounding, partly because of the acoustics of the room. This is a bare room. There's literally no furniture here at all. So it makes it sound even brighter. It's very pleasant wherever you play the piano. Well designed really, and will carry on quite happily for many years to come, providing it doesn't dry out too much, which is something we've often mentioned. The keys, I'd like to take these off. I do find them a little bit off-putting. I think they come off quite easily, and then we really need to put the keys on a buffing wheel to get rid of this, and also to shine the keys up a bit, which will stop them attracting dirt. So thank you very much for listening. If you want a piano assessed before tuning, I'm really keen to do that, so please write to info@robertspianos.com.